So, why are the Cybermen better in the 1960s than any other decade in Doctor Who? Well, let's find out.
I'm the Doctor.
Fantastic. I reverse the polarity of the neutron flow.
Have you ever thought what it's like to be wanderers in the fourth dimension?
When you think about the Cybermen, ask yourself the question, what is it about them that makes them so effectively scary? Is it their lifeless, monotone voices? Their expressionless faces? No, it's not any of that. It's the fact that underneath all that technological metal and plastic upgrades, behind that mask are the true remnants of what they once were. That aspect that they were once like us, and the combination of their unstoppable persistence to convert everyone into being like them is what makes them truly terrifying. And when you look at the actual origins of what sent them down this path of conversion and upgrade, it wasn't some mad, overly ambitious scientist and his desire for power.
I will perfect my own race of people.
But rather, the progression of a race just wanting to extend their lives. But they did it to the extreme, and in the process, they lose their humanity. Like, imagine if you're in a severe accident, and through the wonders in advancements in science, you could then restore yourself with prosthetic limbs and organs. If you could even have pain entirely removed, there would be one question that would remain. Would you be entirely human? And that's what real-life scientists and scientific advisor to Doctor Who, Kit Pedler, and Doctor Who's script editor, Jerry Davis, decided to use as the basis for the inspiration of the Cybermen. The Cybermen appeared in a total of 5 stories in the 1960s, from their very first debut in 1966 in The 10th Planet, all the way through their final appearance in The Invasion in 1968. So let's take a look at all 5 stories and discuss them. Their debut story, The 10th Planet, saw the Doctor, Ben and Polly arriving at the International Space Command tracking station at the South Pole in the far future of 1986. Soon a planet arrives in our solar system, Earth's long-lost twin, the planet Mondas, and its inhabitants, the Cybermen, have come to drain Earth's energy, using it to restore Mondas and convert the human race into Cybermen. And fun fact, this just so happens to be Doctor Who's first ever base under siege story. The 10th Planet is, of course, more recognised for being William Hartnell's final story as the Doctor, meaning it's the show's very first regeneration. It's a slight shame, though, that the Doctor is absent from most of the story. The Doctor collapses in episode 3 and is unconscious until we get to episode 4, which only happened because William Hartnell was taken ill, so a lot of his dialogue had to be rewritten and given to other characters, most notably Ben. But to be completely honest, it still works really well, and Hartnell's scenes that he does have with the Cybermen in episode 2 are just fantastic, especially his iconic speech.
Emotions, love, pride, hate, fear.
The one thing the story does really well is you get that sense throughout it that the Doctor has actually encountered the Cybermen prior to this adventure, which is kind of interesting to see. It is a little bit annoying that episode 4 doesn't exist, but I will say Planet 55's animation is a pretty darn good replacement. The Cybermen have such a presence on screen as these towering, imposing giants who want to ensure survival at all costs, considering all emotions a weakness. The budget's limitations actually work for the Cybermen's benefit, with their mouths that just open lifelessly, producing these sing-song styled voices, their human hands, their unblinking eyes, and their cloth-covered faces displaying the last remnants of what they once were, making these versions still one of the most creepiest designs ever, and these work so well, shot in black and white. But the one thing the Cybermen need so desperately, the whole reason they've come to our solar system, is to drain Earth's energy, and that ends up being their whole undoing, with Mondas absorbing too much of Earth's energy, which results in not only the destruction of Mondas, but the Cybermen themselves. The Cybermen returned only 4 stories later, believe it or not, in the same season, in the Moon Base. It does repeat some of the same formula from the 10th Planet, you know, with it being another base under siege story, except this time, instead of it being set in the South Pole, it's set on the Moon. The Doctor, Ben, Polly and Jamie arrive on the Moon in the year 2070. They soon discover a weather control station that is in the midst of a plague epidemic. It seems the Cybermen have infected the crew with a virus, and plan to take control of the station's gravitron, a device used for controlling Earth's weather, as they plan to use it to decimate the planet. Patrick Troughton really sells you on just how much of a serious threat the Cybermen are, but then again he always does, even though none of the crew want to believe him. Jamie injures himself in zero gravity in the beginning of episode 1, and as a result, he is unconscious for most of the story. This was because the story was written before Fraser Hines was brought on as a companion, so it had to be rewritten to include Jamie. But Polly has a lot more to do with this, actually coming up with an acetone solution based on nail varnish remover to put in the Cybermen's chest units, knocking them out of action. The Cybermen's costumes are more of a streamlined or upgraded version compared to their 10th Planet costumes. These Talossian Cybermen are a lot more advanced, now having the ability to shoot electricity out of their hands, and are also more strategic in this story than they were in the 10th Planet, creating a virus they call Neurotrope X, infecting the crew through their own sugar supplies, and abducting the infected patients in the sickbay. Which is pretty terrifying. I mean, imagine waking up in bed in a hospital and this giant silver cyborg is just staring at you. I mean, wow, that'd be scary. They even have the ability to control the infected like zombies. Whilst the new cyber voices are more monotone and robotic, they are still very effective. The depiction of the Cybermen within this story is just as strong as they were in their first appearance. That scene with the Cybermen that are all marching on the surface of the moon, that looks fantastic. And you can totally see why they refer to the 60s Cybermen as the Silver Giants. I mean, they literally are giant, towering figures. The tomb of the Cybermen saw the Doctor, Jamie, and Victoria arrive on the planet Telos, and discover a human archaeological expedition who are excavating a tomb, searching for the last remains of the Cybermen. The Doctor decides to tag along, and after a series of deadly cyber booby traps, they discover the Cybermen perfectly preserved in ice. But little did they know that the traps were designed to lure the most intelligent humans to convert them into Cybermen. I always go back and forth on which Cybermen story I actually prefer, whether it be the Tomb of the Cybermen or the Invasion. But I suppose from an objective viewpoint, Tomb of the Cybermen is probably the better showcase of the Cybermen themselves. But man, I really love the Invasion. Firstly, having the story be very much like the Hammer Horror and Universal Mummy movies is such a great setting for this story. The Second Doctor is absolutely ahead of every single person in this story, and as soon as he hears the mention of the Cybermen, he essentially knows that this lot have gone seeking something out they definitely shouldn't have. It also serves as a great first adventure for Victoria. She has some really lovely touching moments with the Doctor in this. The character Klieg is this over-the-top villain who is completely mad, a member of the Brotherhood of the Logicians, and has come seeking the Cybermen for their power. What an idiot. That's probably the most illogical thing that you could do. The production design looks magnificent, especially the incredibly impressive honeycomb-like cyber tomb. The sets are so expansive, everyone looks tiny in comparison, especially when they face the Cybermen, and who can forget the awesome-looking cyber controller? That is the most imposing Cyberman ever. Yes, there's definitely some questionable things it does in this story when it comes to the depictions of race, with most notably being Tobermen as the main example, but it is also a product of its time, and thankfully we've kind of learnt since then and moved away from that sort of stuff. The story is perfectly paced, with some of the most iconic scenes in the show's history. It presents the Cybermen as the most terrifying beings devoid of all emotions. They can't be reasoned with, and they only care about conversion, and the insurance of their continual survival. The Wheel in Space is easily the weakest of the Cybermen appearances in the 1960s. Yeah, so the Wheel in Space. It doesn't have the best reputation, and you can kind of see why. It's incredibly slow-paced, and the Cybermen's whole plan seems very convoluted. It seems it would have made a lot more sense to just have the Cybermen use their invasion fleet to attack the Wheel. The Doctor and Jamie arrive on a spaceship called the Silver Carrier. The Doctor injures himself, and Jamie sends a signal to the nearby space station known as the Wheel, and both are immediately rescued. The Cybermen are planning to invade the Wheel and utilize its radio link to give their nearby cyber fleet safe passage, allowing them to invade Earth, wiping out all of humanity. The story is 6 episodes long, and it's quite a drag at the start. I mean, those first 3 episodes I feel like are unnecessary padding. You have the first episode where the Doctor hits his head and becomes unconscious, and then doesn't regain consciousness until episode 3, but even in episode 3, he's in bed for that entire episode, and the Doctor himself doesn't even face the Cybermen until about episode 6. Only episodes 3 and 6 exist, and as a result, it makes it really hard to try and enjoy it when most of it is a photo reconstruction, especially when we get to fight scenes. It's not a bad story by any means, but it's definitely very dull. It would have worked a lot better as a 4-parter. It introduces us to Zoe Herriot, who would become the companion of the second Doctor after this adventure. And this is the first time the Doctor goes and uses the pseudonym John Smith, which was actually made up by Jamie McCrimmon. So it's kind of interesting to see that's where the origin of that name came from.
Can you give me your full name, please?
James Robert McCrimmon. Jamie.
Thank you. And your friend?
The Doctor.
I can't put that down.
John Smith.
Really?
Aye.
The Cybermen in this are covertly working in the shadows for most of the story, taking orders from the Cyberplanet, meaning they don't have all that much to do. It's cool to see the Cybermen using their Cybermats to infiltrate the wheel, and then mind control some of the crew. The Cybermen's overall design and voices have undergone a upgrade, or I suppose it's a downgrade depending on what you prefer, but they also have their guns in their chest units, which is something they repeat in their next story. But overall it's just kind of a bit of an underwhelming Cybermen story. In the invasion, the Doctor, Jamie and Zoe arrive on Earth in the year 1979 or 69, or I suppose it could be anywhere in the 1970s. I guess it just really depends upon what you go on. They meet up with a friend from the past, Colonel Lethbridge Stewart, now Brigadier, who was in charge of the newly formed organisation known as UNIT, the United Nations Intelligence Task Force. UNIT is investigating the electronics manufacturer International Electromatics and its director Tobias Vaughan, who is secretly in league with the Cybermen and preparing for the Cybermen's invasion of Earth. The invasion is a story that looks and feels epic in scope. It's an immersive adventure with likeable, engaging characters, and it also happens to feature the Cybermen. The first 4 episodes are essentially a conspiracy thriller that focuses on UNIT investigating International Electromatics and Tobias Vaughan, as he's putting everything in place preparing for the Cybermen to actually invade Earth. At the same time, he's also kidnapped the scientist Professor Watkins and is forcing him to construct a weapon that he plans to use against the Cybermen to ensure total control and obedience over them. Then the second half of the story focuses on trying to stop the Cybermen. Tobias Vaughan, played so magnificently by Kevin Stoney, is your sort of Bond-type villain. He's incredibly intelligent, he's sophisticated, he can be calm at times and completely unhinged at others. And the fact that he himself has been willingly, partially converted by the Cybermen is such a terrifying prospect, and it's a part of his overwhelming desire to have more power and control.
I didn't think Tobias Vaughan was utterly real. It was almost a dream of somebody's dream. But that didn't make him less attractive to play. One's imagination could take all kinds of leaps when you've got that sort of thought in your mind. The lines said it all, and one just played the lines for what they were worth. You didn't play against them. They were worth pushing hard.
And of course, who can forget his henchman, Packer? Packer is just terribly but yet lovably incompetent, and the guy just cannot seem to catch a break when it comes to apprehending the Doctor and his friends. And how the Cybermen have orchestrated this plan by having Tobias Vaughan create and distribute these electronical appliances through International Electromatics, and then they send a signal from space that renders everyone unconscious, which will eliminate any sort of resistance. That's kind of genius. The Cybermen themselves are the secondary antagonists, but it doesn't feel like they're shoehorned into the story. It uses them really well. The Cybermen are the ones that have been using Tobias Vaughan as a pawn to put everything in place for their invasion. But when the cyber transmitter is destroyed and everyone starts to regain consciousness, they immediately think Vaughan has betrayed them. So they decide to destroy Earth with their cyber Megatron bomb. Because if they can't have total control of Earth, the next logical thing to do is to destroy it. And of course, the Cybermen have some really iconic and memorable moments within this. Of course, everyone knows the scene with the Cybermen marching down the steps in front of St. Paul's Cathedral. All the stuff with them in the sewers is great, where you've got that crazed Cybermen running around that's gone insane with emotions that Vaughan experimented on, and Jamie and Isabella is down there and it's heading towards them. That's some really great tense stuff. The story does a marvellous job of making the Cybermen as threatening as possible. Even when they're not on screen, you can still feel their presence in the story. We also see how emotions can be used as a weapon against the Cybermen. I love the Cybermen's design in this. It's between this design and the original 10th Planet Mondasian Cybermen. Those two are my absolute favourites. And fun fact, Peter Halliday, who plays Packer in this, also provided the voices of both the Cybermen and the Cyberplanner. Now, outside of the 60s, I feel like the Cybermen themselves are more of hit or miss, really. I think they are better represented in classic Doctor Who than they are in modern Who, in my opinion. Like, if you look at their next appearance following on from the invasion, it's 1975, it's Tom Baker's first season, and they've decided to bring back the Cybermen. As much as I love Revenge of the Cybermen, and I do, I love that to death for some reason, despite all its flaws and shortcomings, but it's not the greatest depiction of the Cybermen themselves. Their voices aren't very monotone like they used to be. The phrases that the Cyber Leader will use feels very out of character for the Cybermen. The fact that the Cyber Leader will have his hands on his hips as he paces around looks really very wrong. To have gold be the Cybermen's greatest weakness is silly. But do you know what's sillier? The fact that the Vogons don't use their unlimited supply of gold they have naturally on the planet as a weapon against the Cybermen. And of course, the story is called Revenge of the Cybermen. The Cybermen are totally logical, emotionless beings that wouldn't have any concept of revenge. So they think by destroying Voga, aka the planet of gold, they will then be successful in conquering the universe. Man, I hate to break it to you, Cyber Leader, but Voga isn't the only place in the entire universe where gold is found. It's definitely not the Cybermen's finest hour, but like I said, it's kind of really a guilty pleasure for me. And from there, the Cybermen in the 1980s are okay. I mean, you have Earthshock, which is excellent. It's fantastically paced, it's well written, it has some awesome holy shit cliffhanger moments. David Banks, who played the Cyber Leader through the entirety of the 80s, he has this great, brooding, really penetrating voice, and I love the fact that in Earthshock you can see the organic component in the Cybermen mouthpiece. That's really cool stuff. It has a really cool battle sequence between the crew of the freighter and the Cybermen, and it really showcases just how unstoppable of a force the Cybermen are in this. However, overall I think Attack of the Cybermen may actually be the better representation of what the Cybermen actually are. Controversial, I know, but hear me out. Attack of the Cybermen is much darker in tone than that of Earthshock, showing us the true horrors of the cyber conversion process. The Cybermen in this are as violent as you would ever imagine they would ever be. They have a scene where they literally crush a character's hands, and it's so awesome. Yeah, the story has way too many things going on all at once. It has the whole Cybermen's plan, which is to prevent Mondas from being destroyed by using time travel, and also use Halley's Comet to destroy Earth. And then there's way too many characters, like there's 2 partially converted Cybermen that are working in the mines on Telos that are trying to get to a spaceship, so they need to get a cyberhead, but then they die, and it feels really inconsequential to anything else within the story. Then on top of that, it has a lot of references to previous 60s Cybermen stories, and you may get a bit lost. And of course, the Cyber Controller's in this, but he is nowhere near as effective and as impactful as he was in Tomb of the Cybermen. But I think the one thing that Attack of the Cybermen does so well is it showcases the fact that these aren't just robots. It shows the actual conversion process and what it's like to become a Cyberman. Yes, Earthshock is easily the far superior story. I can't disagree with anyone on that. But in terms of showcasing what the Cybermen are, I think that Attack of the Cybermen gets that really right. And before that story, they made an appearance in the 20th anniversary special, The Five Doctors, where they're on Gallifrey in the Death Zone going up against the Raston warrior robot, and capturing the Master. They only have one more appearance in the 80s, which is in Silver Nemesis, and they may as well be robots in that. I really don't like that story. And then we get into Modern Who, and their first 2 appearances in Series 2, with Rise of the Cybermen / Age of Steel, and the Series 2 finale, Army of Ghosts / Doomsday. Yeah, I got that right, yes. Those 2 stories are good. I don't mind them. It's a different depiction of the Cybermen, you know, being from a parallel universe, and they're less organic. They have the human brain, which is put in a metal exoskeleton, and I will say their delete catchphrase is kind of silly. But overall, I think they're okay. It's a different type of Cybermen, and I'm fine with that. And everything else, after those first 2 appearances, are just very poor depictions of the Cybermen, until we get to Series 10 with World Enough in Time / The Doctor Falls. That is a fantastic Cybermen story that completely understands the fact that these are organic creatures that have been converted into cyborgs. But everything else even after that is never as strong as that again, which is unfortunate. When you look at the Cybermen in the 60s, they're always taken as a serious threatening force. The Cybermen story in the 60s has input from Kit Pedler, their co-creator. So there's a level of consistency within the way the Cybermen are actually written. When these imposing silver giants show up, you know they mean business. They are always depicted as being relentless in their objectives. whether that be the complete conversion or annihilation of humanity. I think the black and white as well also makes them much more effectively creepier. Don't ask me why or how, I think it just does. A lot of the time in modern Doctor Who, the Cybermen themselves are kind of just more of an afterthought. They're this less than important secondary villain to, say, someone like the Master or Missy, where they're being controlled and manipulated by them, and they just become robots again. The Wheel in Space and The Invasion are the two stories in the 60s where the Cybermen's presence isn't actually made clear to us until, the midway point through those stories. But if you take a step back and say, well, what are the Cybermen actually doing within those stories? They're being more strategic. They're planning and putting steps in place to complete their objectives. And yes, the Wheel in Space, it would have made a lot more sense if they just used their invasion fleet to just wipe out all the occupants on the wheel and then, take control of the wheel themselves. But I don't know. Only one story in a series of being surrounded by 5 great, awesome Cybermen stories? That's not too bad. In the 60s, with the exception of The Wheel in Space, their motives are always very clear. And of course, more importantly, their stories are much stronger in comparison. The Cybermen are just much better realised in the 60s, and much more effective as monsters. But that about does it for this discussion video. I hope you've enjoyed it. I would really love to know in the comments section, so please tell me, what do you think of the Cybermen's portrayal throughout the years, even beyond the 60s? Let me know, and tell me what your favourite Cybermen story is. Other things to do, if you could leave a like on the video, because that way more people can see it, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing. But as always, you've been watching The Who View. I hope to see you next time. Bye for now.